Welcome to our podcast today. Champions are built. This is Coach Eric Johnson, the brand.
And this is Coach Aaron Thigpen, the source. EJ.
Ready to go, man? Let's go. What do you say? Hey,
we
man.
just had a discussion on so many topics now. Just went right out of my mind.
Oh, man, this is what we're going to talk about today, Aaron.
This
Okay.
is what happens when you turn 60, folks.
Don't worry. I'm right around the corner in a couple years, bro. Hey, our topic today, Aaron, is, what's the timeline for a D1 athlete? When does it start and how do they get to this level? So we're going to wrap about that today. So, what are your initial thoughts about, the timeline for a D1 athlete, or let alone, how about a collegiate athlete?
Yeah. Yeah. Um, I like this subject. I know we've been talking about saying we're going to talk about it for a couple of weeks, so I'm glad we're taking it off the shelf. But basically when I hear that topic, I'm thinking, okay, because you know me, I'm always talking about trajectory,
Right.
and development plan. And so I'm never kind of like, let's get everything done in 1 year, or you're going to make, 7 miles an hour, or you're going to run, or you're going to drop 6/10 of a second or whatever. But it's about how do we get our athletes on the right path and on the right trajectory to become, or at least have the qualities of a collegiate athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And what are some of the ways we mark those benchmarks throughout their development? And so I usually, i.e., use a scale of, sixth grade, eighth grade,
Right.
ninth grade, 11th grade, senior year, something along those lines.
Right.
And the reason why I always do 12th, or not, I always do 11th and like 7th, because those are the two previous years, are two pivotal years. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
7th grade is a pivotal year to that 8th grade transition where you're going to go into high school, or
Right.
8th grade, or you can even say the 8th grade is that pivotal transition to go into ninth grade. And the
Right.
11th grade is that pivotal year because of the recruiting
Right.
aspect of it. Now you may have a different timeline, but that's kind of generally where I see it. But in general, if we just take the whole block from 6th grade to
Right.
12th grade,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about how we map that out and where your kid might be. Now, we were just having an off the camera discussion about measurables and how that's kind of become a problem, but yet it's the system that these athletes have to work in. So even though I'm not completely on board with it in terms of it telling the story of you as a baseball athlete,
Right.
or a basketball athlete, or a track and field athlete, it's just what you have to use because that's what the recruiters are kind of using. It's a
Right.
objective way, I guess, of saying, of weeding out people.
Right. Right.
And at least as a beginning point. So I'll stop there, but again, what are some of your initial thoughts on maybe how you would break up that whole trajectory between, that 6th grade and 12th grade? I'm not going to talk ages. I'm just going to talk grade.
Right. I like the grade way. I like the grades. And the reason why I like the grades is because it's tied to recruiting more than age than anything. And so I think that's the right way to go about it. Um, I like what you said about, seventh grade, eighth grade, that's a pivot kind of important time. And then the 11th grade, those are all correct. I think those are accurate for a athlete, if we're talking baseball, um, the adjustment from sixth grade, seventh grade, because you're going to three different diamonds, by the way.
Mhm.
Okay, you're going from like a 50, 70 diamond at seventh grade, and then I mean, excuse me, at sixth grade. Then seventh grade, you go 54, 80, 54 inches pitching mound, 80-foot bases.
Mhm.
Just for all those people out there asking, what does that mean? And then 60 feet, then 90-foot bases. That's a jump, man. That's three important times where athletes are making jumps. And what I see in this, and I think that's crucial, is the fact that athletes transition their bodies differently at each of those important times. People develop slower, faster. Maybe some are really highly developed at sixth grade, and then when they get in eighth grade, everyone's caught up to them. So, the trajectory of a timeline for a D1 athlete, those first 3 years, sixth, seventh, eighth, should be truly developmental years with really starting a great foundation for the body and make sure the body is equipped to handle each jump to each diamond. And I think that's important that people kind of forget. They're out there chasing these crazy numbers at showcases that really don't mean anything at that time. I think that's purely getting the body ready to transition to high school. Because now, when you get in eighth grade or high school, it's the same diamond,
Mm-hmm.
you see, and so it's easier um, to really understand your development and now the numbers become a little bit different. It's not the end all, but they become a little bit important
Mm-hmm.
on based on your strength, speed, and your athleticism, So that's kind of my initial thoughts, Aaron, and just to talk about what it means to have a collegiate athlete and where does this start? And it should start in elementary school. And you say sixth grade, I say fifth, sixth, because a lot of those kids are playing together on that little small diamond. The diamond's the same way, but I think you have to get the body ready, Aaron. I really believe that. So you're a fifth or sixth grader, or even a fourth grader. Start understanding what it is to be an athlete. And no one talks about being an athlete. Part of the timeline to be a collegiate student athlete is to be an athlete first and learn how the proper skills you need to have to transition to each diamond.
Well said. I mean, you've left me with not much else to say. Um, I mean, really, I go by a 6 year rule. It
Okay.
takes about 6 years to develop a collegiate athlete, and it takes about 6 years to develop a pro athlete. 4 to 6, depending on
Right.
where when they start that process. And you're absolutely right. And because there's this whole youth sports machine, and athletes can play sports earlier. I get the understanding that you've got to teach them the game, but there's been such a shift and an onus on that part of it, and I see it a lot in soccer as well, that they find themselves behind at some of those pivotal points physically.
Okay.
So in other words, you have kids who are, playing little league, youth baseball year round, and then they can't make the jump to the bigger field
Right.
and then the next bigger field. And so they get further and further behind. And that's compounded by now, once you start to get into the eighth grade, you have athletes going through different stages of puberty. So now you have athletes who are now you see the bigger size disparities, the strength disparities, the speed disparities.
Right.
And so now you see some athletes getting even further behind because one, they're playing in a bigger arena, for lack of a better term. And two, the population of athletes that they have to compete against has become bigger in the sense of now you've got that 8 year old who's got a little shadow, not 8 year old, but eighth grader who's got a shadow, not 8 year old, but eighth grader who's got a shadow, and then you've got another eighth grader who doesn't even have hair under his arms,
Right. Yes.
Um, and
Yes.
so I do think it's important that you start to look at where your kid is at each stage and figure out, hey, am I on course? Am I on trajectory?
Mm,
So having some benchmarks that you want to be able to do physically as an athlete, just as an athlete. And
mm,
if you're playing baseball, then yeah, You want to look at, what's my home to first? What's my, what's my ball velocity, my throwing velocity?
Right.
Um, I don't know if you can tell me if exit velo is really that important at that age, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. It gives us numbers
Because
and
it's equipment,
trajectory.
because it's kind of still also equipment,
Equipment.
you
Yes.
know,
Yes.
based. But you want to start looking at, hey, where am I at physically? What's the physicality of my athlete?
Yes.
Am I, as strong as most kids? Not necessarily as big as most kids, but am I as
Right.
strong or am I as fast? And just from an athletic standpoint, do what tools do I bring to that
Mhm.
current level, and am I prepared for the next level? If what I'm
Right.
saying makes sense. Um, because like I said, I see kids who have played a lot of baseball or played a lot of basketball,
Right.
but as soon as they get to eighth grade or ninth grade, they're
Yeah.
instantly outmatched.
Right.
And my
Right.
question is, again, this may sound self-serving, but if you have the opportunity to play baseball 12 months out of the year, why are you playing baseball 12 months out of the year? Or why are you playing basketball, you know,
Yes.
months out of the year when your physical development
Is behind.
is such a key determining factor as you move up, as you get older or move up in grade level.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I think that gets it's kind of pushed aside, and you've got to, it's not a matter of if but when that becomes the question. and
Yeah. Yeah.
and I see a lot of athletes being behind the eight ball trying to play catch up, or basically getting pushed out of the sport.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now I want to talk on that a little bit because I think you mentioned something that's super important. Players' development is crucial at that sixth grade to eighth grade. There needs to be some sort of rest from these guys playing 12 months out of the year. It's ridiculous. There needs to be athletic development in their body, you know, sports performance training. If there's not, you said it, they get left behind or it's too late. It's not a matter of if, it's when, as you say. I see it as clear as day every day we're in the shop, Aaron. I see it. And I think of all the guys that are training with you, um, and I see where they're making significant jumps because they've been training with you since sixth, seventh, and eighth grade, and they're starting to leave their peers behind because their body is ready to go to the next diamond, which is high school. Like
Mm-hmm.
if I look at our guys, there's seventh guys coming to our company at seventh grade, and I know they've been training with you for a year, and this is their second full year. And I start to see them like not change by the year, but by the quarter
Mm-hmm.
and by half the year, then the third quarter, fourth quarter. Now we're in the fifth quarter, and I go, wow, look at that player now. And I see it in practice. I see that development in practice with just overall strength, overall speed, overall confidence that no one talks about. The confidence because they've been training for so long is that they feel good about what they're doing on the field. And then they're attacking things on the field aggressively. I know of one athlete who body was not ready at seventh grade, and I've seen him train with you, and I've seen just in a year how this player is just taken off, and and his body's ready to take off. If he hadn't trained, he's searching for it baseball wise instead of searching for it from an athlete's athletic standpoint,
Mm-hmm.
like getting the body prepared. So in order to be a athlete, a collegiate athlete in the timeline from sixth grade to eighth grade, it's a very crucial period of development with confidence, with the body, and meshing it together with the sport itself,
Mm-hmm.
any sport. So
Yeah.
I think, that's why I wanted to speak along those terms. And if you're out there listening, parents, and players, it's super crucial that don't play catch up. Playing catch up is a tough game when your peers are already there and you get in high school and you're ninth grade and 10th grade and you're trying to catch up. And then next thing you know, you're a junior and you're trying to catch up. Wow, it could be too late.
Yeah. Yeah. And when I mean, developing athleticism, I'm not talking about throwing your kid into a gym and he's, doing deadlifts and cleans and stuff in there.
Right, exactly. That's not
We're
what
not
we're
talking about that kind of
right.
stuff. And we're not talking about, oh, okay, well, I'm going to put them in, this CrossFit, devil diamond class or whatever you got. No, it's really just,
Right.
okay, can my athlete do the basic things proficiently? Run, jump, throw.
Oh, I love that.
That's where I would start. Can they handle their body weight? Can they do a decent push up? Can they do a pull up? All of that's where all of that stuff starts when you're younger. Everyone, there's parents who get, they start clutching their pearls about, oh, I don't want my kid to do weights. There's all forms of
Right.
resistance training, medicine balls, resistance bands, there's light weights, there's machines. There's so many different ways to develop strength in an athlete and to develop speed, running up hills, running in sand, doing flat running. There's so many different ways to develop these things that aren't going to stunt the growth of athletes, which is, the other
Right.
big scare out there.
Right.
Um, that you can do to kind of move your athlete along. And so that's, what I really want people to take away from this is
Mhm.
start to figure out where your athlete is in relation to their peers and start to do some of that work. And you may have to sacrifice some playing time. But again,
Right.
if you've got 12 months out of the year to play baseball or basketball, you should be able to find, an off season is generally 3 to 4 months. You should be able to find a quarter where you can work on just being a better athlete. You can also find a quarter where you just play a different sport that develops your athleticism. And then use the other half of the year to play your particular sport.
Right.
Um, but if we're looking at a timeline, and I know this is probably what a lot of people want to hear.
Okay.
What are some of the baseball benchmarks you would probably want to see? Let's see if we can kind of discuss those. And I know none of them are set in stone, but what are some general, based on the measurables that baseball is looking for that we want to see in athletes? And there may not even be a lot of data on some of the younger kids. I'm sure there is USA Baseball, but
Right.
I'm not that deep in the weeds on that,
Yeah.
so I don't really know exactly what those are. But
Right.
say, for
Right.
instance, what's an average time for home to first for maybe your sixth grader? Or do they even start timing it there since it's
They do.
undersized field? But I'm
They
just
do.
assuming with the fanatics, I'm sure they do.
They
Someone's
do.
out there probably doing it.
They're
Uh,
doing it. They're doing a 30. They're doing a 30 on these kids.
yeah.
And if you're talking about a sixth grade kid running a 30, I think a really good time is 4.5 on the average, 4.6 on the average. That's a good time. I've
Hmm.
seen burners go 4.3, 4.2.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
that's like, whoa, that kid can move. And that's 90 feet. We're not talking about,
Right.
the smaller diamond, 70 feet. We're talking about this, and they're doing it in splits.
Hmm.
What's the first 15? And, they're doing it like that.
Hmm.
How fast they're getting off the line, how the reaction time is, and then the split at 15, and then the 30.
Oh,
See,
okay. Hmm.
so that's how they're kind of doing these measurables. And so I would think, personally, that's a good time for a sixth grader. Now, by the time that person gets to be, 11th grade,
All right. Well,
that
let's say eighth grade.
okay, eighth grade,
Go in the
that
middle, eighth or ninth grade.
yeah, that needs to come down 2/10. That needs to come down at least a 2/10 of a second, maybe, or a tenth of a second. I think 3/10 is kind of big for that. because players are growing. And
Hmm.
I think people forget about that,
Right.
and that's gonna like, you know, 2/10 of a second, 15ths of a second. That I think that's really good. But
Hmm.
some kids, I'll tell you this, Aaron, and you probably attest, I've seen some kids get a little slower before they get faster. Like they may be 4.5, and then all of a
Right.
sudden they go a year and a half later and they're running the same thing or a 4.6 for 4.7. They're going, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
I'm like going, you're growing.
Puberty.
That's
Yeah.
what's wrong.
Yeah.
Puberty.
You're growing 3 or 4 inches and you've got 1 or 2 shoe sizes and you've gained, 8 pounds or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that I think is what people don't take into account.
Right.
They see their speedy little sixth grader and think, okay, he's here, where everything's
Right.
fine. And they don't anticipate the bodily changes that are going to happen over the next 3, 4, 5 years. And so they get caught off guard, like you said, a year
Mhm.
or 2 years later, and all of a sudden everything's gone all wonky. And now the athlete has is gone from 4.5 to 4.7, but he's also
Right.
6 inches taller and again, one shoe size bigger and maybe 10 or 15 pounds heavier.
Yeah.
Um, so,
Yeah.
and that's why the strength and conditioning and the performance training is so important because it helps
Right.
to keep everything in balance as your body continues to change.
Right. I'll tell you something interesting. Um, when I see a player that's going through that, I don't, they'll be all right. What I get concerned about is that when I see the athlete that is at 4.4, and then they go to eighth grade, okay, so sixth grade, they're 4.4. They go to eighth grade, they're 4.3, and then all of a sudden, I go, okay. And it's the same athlete. Like they haven't changed, okay, in terms of their body. Gotten a little bit taller. And they're not awkward. But
Right,
all of
right.
a sudden, they don't have the strength component or the athleticism because they haven't been training. And
Hmm.
then they go to 10th grade or ninth grade or 11th grade, and it's only a 10th faster.
Hmm.
And I go, why is that? This was a 4.4 person. Now they're only 4.3, 4.25. There's something missing there. And the missing is that there was no performance training
Right.
at an early age to
Yeah.
build a base. See, the base was gone. See,
Hmm.
there was never a base. They're trying to build a base later. They're trying to
Yeah.
build a base when they're in 10th, 11th grade. That's too late for me. I'm sorry.
Right.
But I see hitters trying to get in position to hit, and because they don't have the athleticism or the base, I can't get them in position because they're trying to acquire that strength because their speed is trying to get there. They're trying to get this speed, exit velocity speed, trying to get hip speed, trying to get hand speed. It's not there because they only have so much base. It won't be there for another 4 or 5 years. By then, it'll be too late.
Hmm. Hmm.
You see what I'm saying? How that kind of equates about
Right.
the timeline
Yeah.
now from sixth to eighth, and now eighth, ninth to 10th, and stuff like that. Um, that's I see that a lot, Aaron. But then I see the guys that have been training, they go from 4.4 down to 4.1.
Hmm.
And I go, whoa, hey, that person's body's together. And you can tell. I just look at the body and go, oh, that person's been working,
Hmm. So,
and you could see how they're moving their bodies and stuff like
so as a high school freshman, because again, that's kind of another pivotal
that. Yeah.
point where kids are either make or break, they either stay in the sport or they kind of,
Mhm.
fall by the wayside and, go do something else. So what would that home to first be then for your typical solid ninth grader?
Solid ninth grader. I think if they're running a 4.3, and I say this because it's kind of funny. I see athletes like the start of the freshman year, and then they go through the summer,
Mm-hmm.
and I see a big jump
Yeah.
with strength and speed and everything. So all of a sudden, and we're talking about a dead. We're not talking about a swing. Okay, we're talking
Yeah.
about a dead sprint off the line. So I
Yeah.
want people out there to understand that it's not on a swing. So they start running that, 4.25.
Mm-hmm.
4.25 consistently. And that's the key word. It's consistently. Like it's like 5 to 10 times they're
Not
doing
peak.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not like, okay, all of a sudden he ran a 4.25, then it's a 4.4 again, or 4.35.
Right,
And you
right,
go,
right, right.
what's going on? Was the watch wrong,
Yeah.
or
You
were
throw
you
out the high, you throw out the low.
right? You have to. So I think that's a good 4.25. You know, that's really good. That's
Okay.
like, hey, that's good. That's solid running. That's what a college coach should say. That's solid running. I like that. Their speed. It's a good movement pattern.
So what then is a benchmark for our 11th grader? Because that's kind of when, the recruiting happens and they're kind of getting eyes on and they're going to the showcases and stuff. So, and by then, that for some instances can be the point of no return or the drop dead date. And the reason why I say that is because if you're super slow, if that has a if that term
They hit a
makes
lot.
sense,
They hit a lot.
that's a lot of time to have to make up between your junior and senior year if
Yeah.
you're way off the mark.
Yeah, you better hit a lot.
So,
You
so
better
what
throw
would
hard. You better get that pitcher or something. I don't know, man.
so
You better.
what would that benchmark be? Say for 11th grader, he's really trying to get college recruited. Um, and again, we're not we're talking home the first, but we're really
Right.
talking about this as an illustration of game speed,
Yeah.
the speed, the usable speed in the game.
Yeah.
That's why I didn't ask you about 60, because that's a whole different
That's
animal.
a different
And I
animal.
don't even think that really needs to be used in baseball. It really doesn't have a lot of, uh,
Barry. It's just been like
yeah,
one of those old school
exactly.
things back in the day. You did
Right.
this, and this is what it is.
Right. And that's
Um,
why I didn't
yeah,
bother to ask you about 60 times. That's why, because it's about the speed of the game and being able to keep up with the speed of the game. So that's why I wanted to get an illustration on home the first. So what's that 11th grader? What should he be running by the 11th grade if he wants to be,
consider.
legitimately considered as a collegiate
Well,
prospect?
let's say 3.85, 3.9. I
Mm,
mean, 4.40. 4.0's like, okay, he's 4.0. Okay, that's good. He's offline 4.0. That works, you know.
mhm.
But when you start getting a 4.15, 4.2s, you go, he's not a really good runner, you
Yeah.
know. 4.0 conversation, 3.9, oh, he runs a little bit. 3.6, 5, 3.6, 3.5. That guy is different.
Yeah.
He can really run. So for me, 4 and down,
Hmm.
okay, is a conversation. Anything 4 and up, not
Got
super
to bring
fast.
something else. Yeah.
Yeah, better bring another tool.
Yeah.
Running's not one of the tools. And somebody might say, "Oh yeah, 4 is okay," but I'm like going, In this day and age, maybe that doesn't play anymore.
Right.
He's not because he better be a bopper. That's how I look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
No,
So
yeah.
that's I think that was good illustration of the running, Aaron, because I think a lot of people don't understand it. Running has a lot to do with your athleticism and how strong your body. People don't realize they go, you're fast. You just move your legs fast. You move your arms fast. You're good. No, it's not. No, it's not.
Running is a huge indicator of your athleticism. And
Absolutely.
and you can be blessed with a rocket arm and throw 90 and not be able to run. But I can tell you, I've been doing this 30 years, and every pitcher that I've had that can throw 90 or over can break 7 seconds in a 60.
Absolutely know that.
There's a
Watch.
direct
Yeah.
correlation
I
there,
mean,
and that's why my pitchers train like sprinters, and that's why everyone else is trying to train their pitchers like sprinters now.
yeah.
They're finally figuring that out, and it's not the movement, it's the energy systems that are used. They parallel each other quite a bit. So, but no, I like your take on all of that. Anything else you want to add to this subject?
Well, I think in order to develop yourself into a collegiate athlete, and I tell people this, please run sprints. Please run sprints. And I don't and I it may be off subject slightly, but watching athletes, no one runs sprints at full speed anymore. Like what happened to that? because that's what it takes to play in college. You got to run fast and you got to be able to sustain speed at least 270 feet. I mean, you run in a triple, like, or first and home. You got to have sustainable speed at least for that. That's a minimum. And I don't think people are really running sprints hard enough to be a collegiate athlete. And we're talking about developing a collegiate athlete in a timeline. Run sprints from six, hey, right when you get out, hey, sixth, fifth, sixth, fourth grade, run sprints and keep running them until you get to college. I'm gonna tell you.
Well, I'll add something to that. First, learn how to sprint, then run.
Okay. Awesome.
First, learn how to sprint, because there's a lot of poor mechanics that can, one, get you hurt, two, stall any development that you're trying to
Mm-hmm.
get out of it. So you want to make sure that you learn how to sprint properly, because again, it's the efficiency that allows you to run faster and do other things as an athlete. But yeah, you have to be ballistic.
Mm.
And there's a saying in track and field, you sometimes to be fast, you have to train fast. Doesn't mean train reckless, doesn't mean train without technique, but you do have to learn how to push the body to those certain limits and those barriers. But otherwise, good subject, man. It's
Right.
interesting.
Real
We
good.
should
Well,
probably do one like this on throwing at some point too, so people understand, what the arm should be like, because that's another area where I see a lot of athletes finding themselves wanting, um, later on in their athletic development, and they're trying to rush to get that arm up to par, whether it's a position player or whether it's a pitcher,
right.
and it becomes even more dangerous than the running because the arm is just so much more sensitive to and susceptible to injury. So I think we definitely need to follow up with this one with another one
I,
about,
I like that, Aaron. I think we are going to follow up with that. And everyone out there that's got any subjects they want to hear about, hit us up. Hit us up on our podcast,
yeah.
Spotify, email, text, whatever. Hit us up. This is Coach EJ, the brand.
And this coach here in the source. We'll see you.